Alright, this one's gonna be a little funny because I ended the last one with all this praise for Jim Thompson after I read two of the best books I've read in my life, The Getaway and The Killer Inside Me. And I really loved those books, and I ordered a bunch more Jim Thompson. I've got 5 here that I've read. I've got 4 more I'm gonna read maybe soon. I'm gonna take a little Jim Thompson break, read a couple other things, and probably get back to it. But oh my god, I read the two of the best books I've ever read, and then followed it up with one of the worst books I've ever read, and that is The Grifters. And I was wondering, was this the same guy? There was no way this was the same guy, and there was no way I heard all this praise for this book and for the movie, which also ended up being awful. Because then I thought, maybe it's the movie that's really good, despite this book being really bad. The movie, the screenplay was written by Donald D. Westlake, who's a really good writer. I really like his stuff. And I figured, well, it's Donald D. Westlake adapting Jim Thompson. Even if it's bad Jim Thompson, maybe Donald D. Westlake fixed it. Maybe that's why the movie has all this praise. No, the movie was just as bad and just as boring. I don't even really know what to tell you or where to begin. It follows this guy who does nothing. You know, it's called The Grifters, so, you know, you would think there's going to be some big con, some big thing they're going to try and pull off, you know, like in the movie The Killing. You would think that, because there's a very, very minor, scene involving, the horse races, and I thought, okay, maybe it's going to, involve, they're going to try and pull something off. Nope. There are, there's this guy, Roy Dillon. He's the main character. And then there's a couple other characters, and they all just go around doing nothing and being boring. So that's my review of The Grifters. I really don't feel like going into the details of the plot, because there's not much really more to tell you. They're all just like, I'm a grifter and I want money and blah blah blah. I'm gonna stand around and talk and be boring for the whole book. That was The Grifters. So, I don't know. I ended up following that up with After Dark, My Sweet, which was really good. It wasn't as good as The Getaway, and nowhere near as good as The Killer Inside Me, but it was really fun. It's not a very long book, and all these Jim Thompson books, you could get through them in a day or two. I've had stuff going on, so that it took me a little bit longer to get through them, but they're all pretty slim. This one's only 195-ish pages, and it just had a little too much filler. Basically, it's about this guy, and by the way, most of the characters in Jim Thompson books are drifters, I think. But he's just a drifter, and he comes into this town, and he meets some other shady characters, and they want to pull off a kidnapping. They end up kidnapping this boy that needs insulin, and it becomes a whole big thing. Kidnapping gone wrong. My complaint is that it took a while to get to the kidnapping, because I was at the halfway point and nobody was kidnapped, and then it's a little past halfway where the kidnapping happens. There's just too much standing around talking. I ended up watching the movie After Dark, My Sweet after I read the book, and it had the same problem. The movie is 2 hours long, and it's pretty much straight up just the book. The whole thing, pretty much verbatim. But it's just a little too long, both the book and the movie. The standing around talking is a problem, but I'll at least say this. With Jim Thompson books, his characters are pretty crazy. They're all just lunatics. So even when they're standing around talking, when there's navel gazing, when it's a bunch of just my inner thoughts for 10 pages, it is, more often than not interesting, but I don't know, sometimes I just get a little bored if it's just too much talking. So After Dark, My Sweet, it's not God tier. Seriously, I can't get over The Getaway and The Killer Inside Me, because they were God tier. I'm hoping some of the others are God tier, the other 4 that I have that I still have to read, and there's a few more that I don't have yet that I do want to get. But we'll see how I feel after I go through the other 4. But then after that, I read Nothing More Than Murder. So I might have mentioned this a few times before, but I really love movies about making movies. Movies like Mulholland Drive and Blowout. And I just watched one called Special Effects. That was a really fun one. And I dig that. I don't think I've really read any books about making movies, and that's what I was hoping for with this book, Nothing More Than Murder. It was actually pretty interesting because I hadn't really read a book about a guy that owns a movie theater before, and he's got all these shady dealings going on, of course. But I feel the book was bogged down a little bit because it goes into detail way too much about like insider like terms and all this stuff for people that own movie theaters, and especially 1940s movie theaters. Some of the stuff was lost on me. There's just way too many terms, and I think there was like at the end after the book was over, I feel like they put like a little thing. Oh yeah, the little glossary at the end. Because you finish the book on page 213, and then you turn the page, and they're like, oh, here's our glossary of everything. I'm like, okay, that was real helpful. There's just the same problem as After Dark, My Sweet. It's just a tad bit too long, and I know it's kind of funny to say about slim books that you really could read in 1 to 2 sittings, but it just wasn't very exciting, this one. It wasn't bad by any means. I've read way worse 40s books that I just couldn't get through. This was interesting, especially, again, because like I said, the main character is just a lunatic. But I don't know. It was just average. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. I mean, it was cool, but it was a step down from After Dark, My Sweet. Then I have the opposite complaint about this one. This one's called The Criminal. I think this might be a lesser known Jim Thompson, and this one's even shorter. This one's 158 pages. It's a rare time where I'll say I wish the book was longer. I don't know if I can't even really think of a book that I've read where I'm just trying to see right now. I'm just like, well, which one do I wish like was longer? I don't know if I could really name one. This one I wish was longer for a couple reasons. It probably just boils down to one reason. So let me rewind a little bit. This book's about a teenage boy that gets accused of, I want to put it politely so YouTube doesn't take down the video, but his female teenage friend ends up getting violated and murdered, and then people think that he did it. And the book is told from multiple perspectives, which I found interesting. It's all in first person, and each chapter is labeled so you know who it is. And the boy, I believe his name is Robert, Bob or Robert Talbot, and then you've got his parents. Each of them gets a couple chapters, and that is really cool. Like, I really did like the family dynamic stuff. All that stuff was interesting. And I got to, let me find, the first 5 chapters is the boy Bob and his family, and that's the first 60 pages, and it was all so interesting. And I thought this was like on a fast pace to be like my next favorite, like Jim Thompson, because it was interesting. Everybody gets their own perspective on what happened. And then we get to news reporters, and their stuff was cool, don't get me wrong, but then from page 60 to 158, we don't get the family again. Yeah, there's nothing else from the family. I mean, they're in the story, but it's really different when you're getting this perspective of the boy that's been accused of murder, and you get it from his point of view. You get the family and how it affects them. That's all interesting. But then when you get to the newspaper people and they have brief interactions with the family, that just didn't work for me. And another letdown too was we never saw the girl's perspective. I think that was just really important, that we should have had something from her point of view of what the truth was, because I feel the whole book was trying to give a message of some sort about the truth and what it means. And the newspaper guys kind of like, you get that hint that that's what they're about, and trying to figure out who's being truthful here in the situation. But after page 60, it fell short for me. It's not a terrible book by any means. It was cool. It was an interesting story, but it was just a little bit of a dud. I mean, I feel like I've been kind of just in the middle on some of these books, but that's just the way they fell for me. And we've got one more, which is nonfiction, Roughneck. And this was the next best one after... so Killer Inside Me is number 1. The Getaway is number 2. And then this one, Roughneck, I'd put it at number 3 from what I've read so far. And if it matters, next would probably be After Dark, My Sweet, Nothing More Than Murder, then The Criminal, and The Grifters all the way at the bottom. But Roughneck was really cool. So it's in a way it's an autobiography, but not quite. A better way to put it would be Jim Thompson's just as crazy as a lot of the characters in his book, and this is 204 pages of Jim Thompson doing crazy stuff. After reading this, I was like, yeah, I could see why this guy writes about lunatics. He lived an interesting life. He knew a lot of lunatics. He's always getting in trouble. This takes place during the 20s and 30s, during the Great Depression, and what a struggle it is. And, something that has really been on my mind a lot since reading that and learning about Jim Thompson, reading these books, is, even his books that are just okay, or even something like The Grifters that I didn't like, they're all really well written, and he's just such a good writer. And when I was reading this, I mean, it was just a little reassuring for me, who's also a writer. Whether I'm good or not remains to be seen, but sometimes writers get really annoyed when it comes to struggling, or at least that's how I feel. And it was just actually kind of reassuring, to be honest, when I saw everything that this guy had to go through. And you could be very talented and still not make it for a long time. And still, Jim Thompson, even though he did write 2 Stanley Kubrick screenplays, he didn't even really become that popular of a writer till probably like 10 years after he died, and his books were reissued. I think at the time of his death, they were all out of print. But he has a lot of wacky stories in this, and one of them where he's not acting crazy is trying to find what chapter it was, and it's like towards the end-ish, but basically he and his family, he's got a wife and 3 kids, and they move into a new house, and the people that sold it to him were really shady, and it's on top of a centipede colony. I'm itching thinking about it, to be honest, because my biggest fear is actually bugs. They just freak me out. And so the house is just like swarmed with them, and then he calls an exterminator, and the exterminator is the one that breaks the news to him. No, we're familiar with that house. It's on top of the centipede colony. Who knows how deep it goes? And to kill them all would cost you more than the house cost. And this and that, and oh my goodness, I don't even think he said how they ended up getting out of there. I actually have no clue. But yeah, he went through a ton. He just had a crazy life. So I really enjoyed Roughneck, because it's just, each chapter is basically its own story, and I really did not know where most of them were going. Oh, and I gotta tell you guys, I showed this to my little sister. I told my little sister, like, no matter how mad you get at me, at least I did not introduce you like this in my autobiography. So this is chapter 1. This is the first page of the book. He says he's with his mom and his kid sister Freddie, and he says Freddie was a large girl and she had always enjoyed an excellent appetite. I think I would die if one of my siblings, if they wrote an autobiography and they were like, My brother Nasser, he really loved to eat, and that is page 1 of their book. Oh my god, I'd be so embarrassed. Oh my god, but so that's that. I'm reading a book just came out. I forget the title of it, but the author's name is Sarah Ransom, and she's an Epstein survivor. And I just started reading that a couple days ago. I'm like maybe 30 pages into it. I think I started it yesterday. I'm like 30 pages in, not very far. So I'm gonna be reading that. I've got a bunch of other stuff I really want to read. I don't know what I'll be reading because I don't like to plan it. I don't like to be like, these are the next 5 books I'm gonna read. It just kind of turns out however it turns out. It's always a surprise to me. It's whatever I'm in the mood for. Maybe something I bought like 5 years ago, suddenly I'm like, yeah, I'll read this, or I'll buy something brand new and be like, I'll just jump into this one now, or we'll see. It's just, or maybe if I'm going through, sometimes if I go through like a true crime phase on YouTube, or like a case gets my attention, I've got like a whole shelf of true crime stuff somewhere, and I'll just be like, yeah, I'll read this true crime thing now. And so that's how it goes. I don't know what I'll be reading next. After this book by Sarah Ransom, maybe some more Jim Thompson, maybe a few other things. I did get a book, I forget the title of it. It just came out. It's about the Black Dahlia, and maybe I'll read that one next. I want to read some of the other David Grann books I have. I've got a couple of them, so we'll see what I end up reading for May. So that's all for now, guys. Thank you for watching.